Very good investments.
Question number 2, Simon Bridges.
Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Finance.
Order. I want to hear this question. Simon
How
Bridges.
did Budget 2011 continue the government's program to build faster growth, higher incomes and more jobs?
The Honourable Bill English.
Oh, well, Mr Speaker, it did that by specifically continuing a heavy investment in productive infrastructure, continuing to grow investment in research and development and innovation, providing opportunities for greater savings from New Zealanders, to which they're responding positively, and setting a credible path back to surplus so we can have sound government finances, and at the same time protecting the vulnerable at all stages.
Simon Bridges.
Supplementary. Following the budget, what reasons are there to be optimistic about the economy's prospects over the next few years?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, just more good news. I've seen a number of reports showing the economy is making good progress, and specifically heard some statements this morning from the Chief Executive of Westpac Bank, Gail Kelly, pointing out the difference between the positive approach to the future in New Zealand and the increasing negativity in Australia. Despite the challenges of the earthquakes, we have the highest terms of trade since 1974, the lowest interest rates in 45 years, 40,000 new jobs created in the last year, and we're becoming increasingly competitive, particularly with Australia, through a favourable exchange rate.
Simon Bridges.
Mr Speaker, what other reasons are there to be optimistic about the economy?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, another reason is that the average after-tax wages continue to rise faster than prices. While everyone's circumstances are different and there are many challenges for New Zealand families, after-tax wages grew 7.1% in nominal terms and 2.5% in real terms in the year ending March 2011.
The Honourable John Boscawen.
Supplementary, Mr Speaker, to the Minister of Finance. How much higher would growth, incomes and job levels be if government spending as a proportion of GDP had been capped at 29%, as it was under Labor in 2004 and as it was recommended by the 2025 Task Force?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, I think it is likely that the New Zealand economy would have performed better and we could have had higher incomes if there hadn't been a splurge in government expenditure from about 2005 onwards, then compounded by the effects of the New Zealand recession, then the global recession. However, that's the past. We are getting the government finances back in order and putting in place a program to help lift incomes across the board.
The Honourable David Parker.
Does the projection in his budget show New Zealand's net investment position, that is New Zealand's total debt to the world less our assets overseas, the measure he until recently said was the most important, show New Zealand is projected to get more indebted each year from negative 78.6% of GDP this year to negative 85.3% of GDP in 2015?
The
Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, yes, the projections do show that, with two qualifications. One is that all measures of New Zealand's external transactions are going to be affected by the very large insurance flows coming into New Zealand. And secondly, there are differences of opinion about whether New Zealanders will go back to their old habits of spending more than they earn and borrowing to cover the difference. I'm optimistic. I don't believe New Zealanders will go back to the way they were behaving in the last 10 years.
The Honourable David Parker.
Can the Minister confirm what he said in his last answer, that was the reinsurance proceeds are not already shown in those figures?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, I made the general comment that the insurance flows are going to affect all our external measures of financial transactions, including, for instance, the current account deficit, which for the first time in 30 years, we'll have a surplus, apparently, and that is mainly because of the insurance inflows. But we don't expect that to last.
The Honourable David Parker.
Is the lack of credibility of his budget projections, which are premised on asset sales he has no mandate for, service cuts he cannot name, and rosy growth forecasts that he has failed to deliver on in the past, the reason why Standard & Poor's has his government's credit rating on negative outlook?
The Honourable Bill English.
No, Mr Speaker, that's not true. We've made some balanced judgments about the future, and they're a lot more credible than Labor's promises in Te Tai Tokoro to lift incomes, spend billions, and give people more jobs when they have no way of doing that.
The Honourable John Biscowen.
Supplementary to the Minister of Finance, why did he continue with the splurge in government spending that he's just referred to in the first 2 years as Finance Minister and take until now his third budget to make minor changes to the interest-free student loans and the massive incentives for KiwiSaver?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, because this is a careful and considered and balanced government. On the one hand, we have advice from the ACT Party to rip into government spending regardless of the consequences for people. On the other hand, the Labor Party, who want to spend a whole lot of money New Zealand simply doesn't have. And the government is taking a balanced position, protecting the vulnerable, supporting the economy in a recession, but being fiscally responsible.
Simon Bridges.
How is the government creating an environment that supports higher incomes and more jobs?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, this is an interesting question because when we hear about concerns about the cost of living, the answer to that, of course, is higher incomes, but there has to be some kind of plan to assist the growth of incomes. The government has focused on doing everything it can to provide the confidence that will stimulate investment and employment in the private sector so that they will create more jobs and have the ability to pay more. I could go through a long list of the steps the government's taken, but that is our response, a constructive response to the pressures of the cost of living.
Dr Russel Norman, supplementary.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does the Minister agree that a knowledge-based economy is one of the foundations for higher incomes in New Zealand, and hence how does it make sense that the government cut spending on research and development in the last budget?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, we didn't, and we'd be happy to take the member through just what has happened with increases in R&D spending. In each of the previous two budgets, we lifted spending on R&D. And in this budget, it continued to go up, even though we didn't appropriate more money. But as the member will know, we focus more on value for the money that we're spending, not just on the total amount of money, because that is not a measure of anything in particular.
Dr Russel Norman.
Is it not the case?
Order, Dr Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Order. I want to hear the question. Dr Russel Norman.
Is it not the case that other OECD countries that are doing better in terms of producing high-income jobs have a higher proportion of government spending on research and development than New Zealand does? And in fact, New Zealand is down the bottom of the table for government spending on research and development.
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, some countries do spend more than us. I think it would be difficult to generalise these days that they're all quite doing better, because many OECD countries are loaded up with public debt and are in the middle of slashing public services, slashing pensions, slashing what public servants get paid to try and get on top of their public debt. New Zealand isn't in that position because we've taken reasonable and balanced decisions. But the member's contention is arguable, and we'd be happy to have the discussion with them.
Question number 3, the Honourable Marion Street.
Thank you, Mr.